Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to a new thing we're doing here on the channel. This is called The Reserves, where we talk about NBA basketball, all things NBA, everything you guys want to cover here in the comments, any questions you might have about your favorite team, what we think of the league as a whole. And we're just going to be talking about kind of what's going on in the league, some of the recent news, recent trends, everything we've been kind of seeing ourselves. Just a new way to talk about basketball here on the channel. So hopefully you guys do enjoy content. And once you're in here, please ask some questions. That'd be awesome in the comments below. We definitely love to have some dialogue with you guys. So Austin, looking at the NBA right now, obviously we had a huge trade with James Harden going to the Brooklyn Nets. What's your initial thoughts on that deal and what the Nets gave up and kind of the pieces there that moves around?
Yeah, so looking at the trade as a whole, obviously I think that Brooklyn comes out a winner regardless, pretty much no matter what they gave up. They're going to come out of this a winner. Why? They've now shifted to the championship favorites with the big three, but more on that to come. Just looking at the trade, though, I don't think Houston did a very good job. I'm going to be honest. I think a lot of people are really high on what they got in return, but for me personally, I'm not super excited. I also want to get your thoughts on the whole Karis LeVert thing, because now they found something on his kidney. I can't remember what it was, but that plays a big part in this trade.
Yeah, it definitely does. And honestly, for Karis LeVert, this is a blessing in disguise getting traded. Going through that physical, they discovered this. It could have been something that, maybe developed into something way worse for him. It sounds like he's going to be out for a while, but at least he's getting it taken care of before problematic actual health. So for Karis LeVert, it's very good actually that he got traded and he gets to kind of cover this. But at the same time for Indiana, obviously they moved on from Oladipo, found this on the physical, did not feel like it was something that was worth stopping the trade or halting it, which allowed all the pieces to go through. That could have gotten really messy if that did hold up the trade quite a bit. You probably would have seen Karis LeVert go to Houston then instead, and Oladipo return back to Indiana. It would have been kind of a crazy situation, but I think for Indiana long-term, I still think it makes a lot of sense. They got 2 years younger at that position. They got quite a bit cheaper, and he's under contract. I think that's a much better situation for them moving forward. And for Houston, they obviously want to compete still. They brought in Oladipo to do so. I'm not really sure if that's what I would have done, but that's ultimately the direction they went with it.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to kind of prompt you with this. Now, looking at the Brooklyn Nets as a whole, let's talk about their pathway to a championship. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed in NBA, but obviously you feel like they're a very strong contender against, the powerful West in terms of the Clippers and the Lakers. So looking at not only how they match up, but kind of talk about the possible issues that they might have with a lot of cooks in the kitchen. A lot of guys, you had talked about, some of the role players, might not be as willing to take the shots that they need to take. And obviously they're going to want to get it to the stars in their hands, because that's what you want to do in this league. It's a star-driven league. You want these all-time great scorers and Harden and Durant to cook. Also, Kyrie has the ability to do that. But looking at it from that stance, is that problematic? Do you see any issues lying with that? Obviously, they're the most talented team on paper now because they have that big three. But do you see there being any possible issues on a pathway to a championship?
Yeah, I do think there are two really big things. You had kind of touched on it. I think that for one of it is size. I think that they'll struggle a little bit against Milwaukee. And I think that they'll also struggle a little bit against, if they were to face the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals, I think that would be a tough matchup, because they're asking DeAndre Jordan now to take in a lot of that interior pressure on him, both defensively and on the offense end. I don't think that they're going to be an elite rebounding team. Obviously, Harden and Durant can crash the boards pretty well. But when you're looking at a true box out, who's going to really fight for boards against other bigs, I don't think that they have a real guy there, because DeAndre Jordan is somewhat spotty at that actually in the last few years of his career. And he just, he's a guy who's going to play probably 25 minutes a night now at this point. He's not going to give you 36 minutes, and that's going to be something they need when they go up against Milwaukee. Brook Lopez, Giannis Antetokounmpo, that's a hard matchup. Brook Lopez very known for taking advantage of mismatches on the block. Giannis, obviously a physical monster. That's going to be a tough situation for Brooklyn, in my opinion. But also, like you had mentioned, the cooks in the kitchen, the amount of talent that they have on the perimeter. Guys like Joe Harris, they need to be competent and go and attack still. They can't be, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden are going to get me my shots. You have to go out there and say, I'm going to get my own shot still. I'm going to do my way, because the moment that the guys like Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan, and so on down that roster, Jeff Green, the moment that they stop actually being aggressive and looking to create on their own, that's when they're going to start running into problems. And I'm pretty nervous about that for the Brooklyn Nets.
No, that's totally understandable. And I just want to talk about, how does Kyrie kind of factor into it? Because he now sits as more of the odd man out, I believe, than obviously the other two stars. And I think that's part of the issue of why he's been. I don't even know how to describe the last couple of weeks for him and what he's been pulling. I don't really know what his intentions are and where his head's at, because we always know with Kyrie Irving, there's uncertainty mentally and just about the game. Where does this put Kyrie Irving?
That's a great question. And that's actually something I was going to prompt you with too at some point during this stream, is looking at Kyrie Irving there. Obviously, we had the raid on the Capitol. I think that played a factor into kind of, setting him off. I thought that was the reason why he was taking a step away with personal reasons. Then we had the video of him dancing at a birthday party without a mask on with a whole bunch of people around him and so on. Obviously got a huge fine for that. And now he's just missing games. It's not really what you want. They need to work on getting their chemistry right. And he is kind of the odd man out there. When you're looking at what Harden and Durant were able to do just this past game against the Magic in their first game together, the two of them combined for 74 points, 19 assists, and I believe 20 rebounds. That's pretty incredible. You're not going to have a lot of duos in the league that are capable of it. So you're wondering, how does Kyrie kind of fit? I think that, honestly, I see Kyrie having a fit on this team, but I think that Steve Nash is going to have to get really creative with his rotations. I think that you're looking at James Harden probably playing the first 6 minutes of every game and coming out, and then sitting the rest of the first quarter, letting Kyrie play the whole first quarter, and Durant play about 8 minutes of the first quarter, and then Kyrie sitting for the first 8 minutes of the second quarter, and letting that be kind of the Harden and whoever show, and then figuring out a way to get Kyrie back in with Harden down the stretch of the quarter. You're going to have to, basically, I think the two of them are going to not share the floor as often as they are on the floor with the other one off, actually. Obviously, closing minutes is going to be interesting, too, because there's no way you cannot have one of them on the floor for the end of a game, but they'll have to figure out how to play together. I think Kyrie Irving is a guy who's actually a little underrated as an off-ball player. He had done that for many years with LeBron. I think that he's a creative passer, actually. I think he's a guy who can shoot at an elite clip when he's off the catch, but he's just going to have to be willing to do that. And I think ultimately he's going to look at himself in the mirror and say, James Harden has been doing this for much longer. He's a much more polished offensive player than I am. That's my opinion on it, at least. I think that Kyrie's going to have to take that backseat role a little bit when it comes to shot selection. But I think that if he does that, his efficiency is going to go up, and I think he's still going to be a really great player that way. Welcome, everyone, to the stream, by the way. Super glad to have you guys in here. Please be asking questions in the comments. So, Austin, my question for you was actually about Kyrie Irving with his new role there. And Matt Barnes actually commented on an Instagram post today saying that they should trade Kyrie Irving and all of his BS for a whole bunch of role players and picks back to give themselves more flexibility and give themselves some depth. What do you think on that? Do you think that that would be a good move, or do you think that kind of defeats the purpose of making this move for Harden?
I think exactly what you just said. I think it really defeats the purpose of what they're trying to do. Obviously, creating the most talented big three of all time in terms of individual skill set. I think you can definitely consider this as the best big three ever. I'm not saying that. I don't think that they should rule that out based off of behavioral. If it starts messing with the chemistry between Durant and Harden, I think that should be looked at then, sure. But I think you need to definitely, kind of ride this out. You need to let this go for a couple of months here. So at this point, I think that looking at it now, you have to keep Kyrie Irving. I really do think so. I don't think the return you get back is going to be anywhere close to what his actual value would be, just considering this is one of the lower point of his careers in terms of just mentally where he's at. And I think there was part of the issue was maybe feeling unwanted or not appreciated enough by Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant wanted to go get another guy, that was somewhat similar to how he plays. obviously ISO dominating guard. So I think that actually kind of played a factor in this.
Yeah, I do think it actually does as well. We saw, obviously, James Harden had been working out with both of them, and I think Kyrie Irving had felt it was a 1-2 punch, and now with Harden in there, I think it's a 1-2-3 punch, and I just don't think Kyrie Irving really wanted to be that 3. Obviously, when he was in Cleveland, he was the 2, Kevin Love was the 3. He was the one who did a lot of that sacrificing. So I think that's really one of the ways that could derail their season. But what do you, we have a question here. What do you guys think about the rookies so far? Austin, for you, which rookies have really stood out at this point?
I think Tyrese Halliburton's having quietly a great season. I think not a lot of people are talking about him because he is in Sacramento, but I mean, off to a great start. So I'm very, very excited to see him. And I was worried once he got onto the Kings if that was going to be detrimental to his career, because I felt like he's one of those guys that if he goes to a bad organization, it's going to look like a bad selection. But honestly, he's done a very, very nice job. I think LaMelo Ball, another guy that is starting to click with Charlotte. I think the Gordon Hayward thing signing worked wonders for them. Having a go-to guy, a guy that can score. Definitely love that move for Charlotte. And a lot of people were quick to jump on it and call it a bad signing. And it's going to be a terrible signing, years to come. But to me, I don't see it that way. And I think it's proving that it's going to work there in Charlotte with Gordon Hayward. But he's been rather impressive overall. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you mentioned Tyrese Halliburton. He's a guy who stuck out to me, not only just based on his play, but just already the level of progression I'm seeing from him is when he makes a mistake, a few possessions later, he turns around and does something that isn't a correction to that mistake. I think he's actually one of the smarter guys from the class from what I've seen so far. He's definitely really improved since even coming into the league. And that jumper, obviously very unorthodox. We had been talking about how we still think he's going to be a quality shooter. Some question that, and he's shooting the ball at a really good clip so far for Sacramento. I think it was a no-brainer pick. We saw Killian Hayes go before him. I thought that was a bad move. We had been very vocal about that here on the channel as well. We had given grace to all those. If you guys haven't seen those, go check those out on our channel. It's really kind of proving part of our draft process who we thought was going to be good, who we thought was going to be not so good. LaMelo Ball, he's another guy you mentioned, and his all-around game, I believe he's leading the rookies in almost every single statistic at this point. Part of that is he's in Charlotte, and some of the rebounds he's sitting weak side. It's kind of the same thing Luka Doncic does. It's not like a center grabbing rebounds, but still at this point it is. He's still grabbing them, and they're valuable. His breakout passing is insane. We saw one really nice one to Hayward, and like you mentioned too, Hayward's such a good addition there. I want Obi Toppin to get healthy and start getting more minutes. Julius Randle's been playing well. I'm not a big believer in that. Watching him, his numbers really jump off, but he's brutal to watch in my opinion. Actually, he's a ball stopper, and he sits there and he's got a little bit of Eric Pascal to him, who I really dislike watching as well. I think those two guys have the league kind of tricked on their abilities, but I don't know. I hope Obi Toppin gets healthy, starts playing more. Also, Denny Avdia is a guy we had been high on, both of us, and there in Washington, having Westbrook and Beal's kind of limited what he's been able to do with the ball in his hands, which I think is really where his greatest strength is. I was hoping they'd play with him a little bit more, being a playmaker. They have not done so, though, so far. Game Don't Wait, welcome to the stream here, says, who has the best backcourt in the East? I did just mention the Wizards, but now I think with a healthy Kyrie Irving back and James Harden being with the Brooklyn Nets, I think that is pretty easily Brooklyn. That is the best backcourt in the East. They have a top 5 player in the world in James Harden and another top 20 player in the world in Kyrie Irving. That's just going to be hard to duplicate for any other team. Austin, is there any other backcourt that stands out to you, though, outside of Brooklyn?
Obviously, you would consider the Beal and Westbrook in terms of individual talent, but not necessarily how well they mesh together. If you consider that, then I don't think they are. But individual talent wise, they are definitely up there. Obviously, two very, very good players. Looking around the East, and I don't really think anybody else matches. I'm trying to think even. I mean, Chicago just doesn't have that second guy with Zach LaVine, so that's a no-go for me. Milwaukee doesn't have that. Toronto doesn't have that.
Yeah, right. Boston, maybe if you classify Jaylen Brown as a shooting guard with Kemba and Jalen, but like again, there's not even close to what Kyrie and Harden are. It's just you're basically fighting for consolation at that point. Before that trade, that maybe would have been who I went with was the Celtics, but with Brooklyn getting James Harden, I think that it's easily the best backcourt in the East. How about the West, Austin? Is there a specific backcourt in the West you like?
Obviously, prior to the Clay injury, you'd love to see the Clay and Curry. Just such a great backcourt. I'm trying to think specifically. Luka and whoever. Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Luka and Tim. Yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr. has played pretty well this year. He's had a couple 30-point games. Love seeing him. He's coming off the bench. I don't know how closely you've been paying attention to that, but he's sixth man of the year right now. So let's keep pushing for that, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of interesting to me.
Who else in the West? Because there's just a lot of great forward play in the Western Conference.
Did you mention Booker and Paul?
No, I did not. But that would definitely be one of the top ones.
They're like good, but I don't know if they're the best. Obviously, if Clay was healthy, I'm pretty sure you mentioned that as well. That they would be 1-2. They'd be insane.
Exactly. Just looking at it, I mean, Ja Morant doesn't have a complimentary piece to him.
To me, yeah, right. The one thing to me too, looking at Golden State, man, they have been linked to James Harden a couple times. Obviously, nothing really materialized there, but could you imagine if they pulled the trigger on that? If they would have sent, like, say, Wiggins, Oubre, Wiseman, and a ton of picks. I mean, that's a better package, in my opinion, than what the Rockets got.
Absolutely.
And then you take back probably like Eric Gordon to make the salaries work. I mean, that's a much better team. You're looking at a really improved team this year with Harden coming in and gives you a little bit more in that half court. But then also once Klay Thompson's back, I mean, holy cow, like that team is really scary. Obviously, you have to mortgage the future a little bit with Wiseman going out, but it's worth it for James Harden, I feel. I don't know. What's a team that so far, like, you've been kind of surprised about? Obviously, Toronto hasn't played well. That's kind of my surprise team.
That was mine. I was going to say because Toronto, I was not expecting that big of a decline after the Gasol and Ibaka departures. I didn't think it was going to make that much of a difference because Boucher's played very, very well in place of Ibaka's role. But teams that have surprised me.
I'll pull up. I got the NBA standings here too. If we want to look at them.
Yeah, let's see them here.
Obviously, the Wizards have not started out well, but we were pretty cynical of that deal when it happened. So
yeah, well, the Heat for sure. Obviously, have best start. Very, very surprising to me. I'm okay. One thing I will say: the Indiana Pacers still being the third seed in the East. That's pretty impressive to me. I don't know. I think that they're going to be a playoff team once again, but I wasn't expecting them to be where they are right now currently.
Yeah, Sabonis has come out again playing really. He's like one of the most underrated players in the league. You know how I felt about him for a while. I don't know. There's not much appreciation for guys who pass out of the post unless their name's Nikola Jokic, because for some reason the media seems to love him but doesn't know who Domantas Sabonis is now at this point. The other thing to me, too, with Toronto, I kind of want to talk about them a little bit, is one thing with them for me is they're really just failing to finish games, which is surprising to me because they have so much, veteran presence on that team with Kyle Lowry. Fred VanVleet's a veteran now. Basically, their whole team is essentially veterans with Alex Len there and Aaron Baines and OG Anunoby. Now, he's not young anymore. This team's not really young. They've got a lot of playoff experience, and yet they're not closing out games. I think a lot of that comes back to Pascal Siakam. I had been cynical of this even before we started the channel here about how much money he got the max. And, people were clowning me right away when he was scoring 22, 23 points a game. But there's a difference between scoring 22 or 23 points a game or scoring 8 to 10 points in the fourth quarter. That's really the difference between max level guys. Over the course of the past 20 years, guys who score, 7 to 10 points a game in the fourth quarter were Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and so on. And then there's these guys like Monta Ellis who scores 22, 23 points a game, but doesn't really close out games. I think that's kind of where we're seeing Siakam find himself a little bit more. I just don't really feel like he was a max level player. He has one go-to move and it's really predictable, especially when you're at the end of the game. You can't do a spin move every single time. That's what he does. What's your thoughts on Siakam kind of moving forward? I'm not saying he's not a good player either, but I just think for what they're expecting him to do, he's not built for that.
So let me prompt you with this before we get into that. Why aren't they working?
Why aren't they working?
From just the Siakam closing out issue, because Fred VanVleet's been known to be a closer. So why isn't it working?
Well, part of it is that they've become slightly predictable in what they're going to do. So basically, one thing with VanVleet when he's manipulating the pick and roll is if you jump him high as the hedger and you double him, he's not a good enough passer to hurt you on a double team. Because basically he's going to look for his release, and then at that point you have to have a guy like Boucher or Aaron Baines make a next level pass to help him out, and they're just not going to do that. Also, so Kyle Lowry's still a good player. I think OG Anunoby hasn't really played up to what they just extended him to. He's having kind of a down year in my opinion, a little bit as well. And then ultimately, I just think that they're just getting bad bounces too a little bit. I don't think that they're necessarily playing as bad as they are. The closing out is the biggest issue for me. If they closed out games, they could, have a winning record right now, and I believe they're 3-8. So I just think that if they were closing out games, I think that they could easily be 6-5 or at least 5-6. Siakam's missed two shots within 15 feet of the rim on game-winning attempts. That could easily turn you around if you have a different closer in there than him. I don't know why VanVleet's not getting the option either. That's something Nick Nurse, who I'm usually high on, watching him this year. His end of game decision making to get the ball to Siakam in the backcourt to have him dribble up and advance it. I don't think that's the move. I think they should be putting the ball in VanVleet's hands, like you mentioned, him being the closer. So I think ultimately that's kind of the issues that they've had at this point, but I don't know. Outside of that, I expect them to turn around. They're a playoff team. I don't see any way that they're not. But our Vega, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you in here. Sorry, Austin, did not mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so there's not a lot to really be said in terms of reading too much into it, where people are saying that they're not a playoff team. They're a playoff team, and there's no question about it to me. I think they are still a playoff team moving forward. Another team I want to talk about quick is the Thunder. Obviously 6-6 record, but that's not what people thought either. A lot of people thought they were going to be the worst team in the entire league with how they tore it down. But obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has really carried that team. Obviously, a couple of okay role players to go along with it. Obviously, Al Horford is another guy that people extremely underrate, especially after he got the big contract, didn't live up to it. Part of the problem is a narrative is created if you get a big contract, you play yourself into a big contract, and then you don't play up to it, then all of a sudden you're deemed bad, rather than just adjusting your mental that, okay, he's not worth his contract, but he can still be an effective player.
I think I lost you there for a second. But yeah, based on what you were saying, I definitely know where you're going with that about guys like Andrew Wiggins. Yeah, he's overpaid right now too. It's not that he's a bad player. It's just you have to look at that contract I wouldn't pay him that, but he's definitely a good player still. And I think the true is same for Horford, or the same is true for Horford rather. And also looking at Shea, I had actually before the season started in one of our videos said that I don't think that the Thunder will even be close to the playoffs. But I think that people are really underrating them. I think people were thinking they'd be a 15-win team. I just didn't really see that. I think they're more of a 25 to 30-win team. Probably not in a 72-game season, probably a 22 or 23-win team. But still, with that, that's not terrible. Looking at what their teardown is, obviously they're going for a long-term rebuild, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the top 50 players in the world. He's a guy who can create for himself, create for others. He's dynamic. They've got defenders there. Al Horford was a good pickup for them, in my opinion. They got him and a first-rounder for Danny Green. I think that's a mad overpay by Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers. And I just think looking at what the future really is for the Thunder, Pokashevsky struggled a little bit, but defensively, I think his rim protection's been noticed. Looking at Lou Dort, he's really emerged there. Darius Baisley has played pretty well this year as well. Some of these young guys have taken a couple steps forward. That's something they needed to ensure they wouldn't be right down at the bottom. But I think it's still very possible that they could have a top 5 pick in this draft. I'm almost certain that they will. But I just don't think that they're going to be as bad as some of these other teams, especially the teams out east that have been struggling early. Especially like if we look at a team like Detroit. Detroit has almost no talent on that roster, whereas looking at OKC, they have actually quite a bit of talent, in my opinion. R. Vega says, Austin, how would you like a draft of Lawrence, Leatherwood, Samuel Jr., Farmouth, and Holland? I'm assuming he's talking about your Jags. Yeah,
love it. I absolutely love what you put together there. Not sure if that, if you came up with that or where you found it, but I do. I'm pretty happy with that. If that's what we come away with, I'm all in. I'm definitely all in. I would really like to get Freiermuth at the tight end spot because Eifert is in his contract year. We need a corner bad. Obviously, I don't think our corner room is good enough moving forward. And obviously, we have C.J. Henderson as a building block. Trey Herndon took a step back this year. Definitely need a safety. Jared Wilson and Wingard are not the answers there. So I love that. Absolutely.
You're telling me Wingard's not the answer?
That's a fact.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts so far on what we're seeing in the league. Is there one quick question, and then we'll probably end the stream here. If you had to choose a team this year, like if you were doing a one season, who would you pick to win the championship based on how everything sits right now before the trade deadline? Who would you choose? And then also for the next 5 years, what team would you choose if you were like to be running them? What team would you want for their composition?
The team to win this year for sure. I shouldn't say for sure. I think it's pretty likely, barring anything really changing, would be the Nets, just considering the offensive firepower they have. I mean, we have not seen a big three like this. I mean, obviously the Bosch, Wade, LeBron mixing was very, very talented, very, very good. But this is the most skillful that we've seen ever in a big three. So I think they should be the favorites this year. However, I could see with Kyrie going off the rails all of a sudden and just completely messing up the season, and then all of a sudden you don't have your role players at all because you've moved them to get James Harden, obviously. But if Kyrie Irving just completely shuts down and pulls this where he's not playing, he's playing, he's not playing, he's playing, then I could see, obviously, the Lakers still win the championship. But I think for me personally, it's the Nets. And then moving forward for the next 5 years, I'm going to go with the Dallas Mavericks. I think that the Dallas Mavericks have the best composition for the next 5 years. They've not locked themselves into any bad contracts moving forward through the next 5 years. I think Kristaps Porzingis will emerge as a for sure consensus top 15 player and eventually maybe top 10. And I think Luka will be the best player in the NBA over the next 5 seasons. That's my take.
Okay, that's interesting. So for me, for this 1 year, I knew you were going to pick the Mavericks, by the way, for the 5-year thing. I knew you were going to choose them. But for the 1 year, there's 3 teams, really. It's between the Clippers, Lakers, and Nets for me. I think that the Clippers are much improved from last year. Luke Kennard's shooting, I believe, 47% from 3 right now. A phenomenal addition for them. Serge Ibaka has been a great addition. We've seen how much better he fits than Zubats in that starting lineup. They are able to keep that depth basically by replacing Hero with him. And in a better situation too, I think it just fits better. And Paul George has come out firing this year. We had been telling everyone all offseason to not lose their minds over him. Everyone lost their minds over him. We were right. So that's something I like to see there. Looking at the Lakers, I think that AD and LeBron are still one of the toughest duos of all time to deal with. But over there in Brooklyn, like you mentioned, that trio, out of the 3 big threes that really, or 4 big threes that really stick out to me long term, you're looking at Pippen, Jordan, and Rodman. The nice thing about that is the fit was so smooth because you had kind of a point forward in Pippen. You had an all-time great scorer in Jordan, 2 dominant defenders on the wings, and then Rodman, who's a physical dominant defender down low and perhaps the best rebounder to ever play. The fit between those 3 was phenomenal. Obviously, Curry, Clay, and KD, that trio is a perfect mesh because Clay was so selfless, moving without the ball. That's what he does. Curry was able to play off the ball. That's a lot of what he does as well. And KD, just the spacing for him was so nice. I think the fit there was perfect. LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, that fit actually, if you look at that team, having to sign those guys instead of, make a move to trade for one of them or drafting at least two of them, actually put a real damper on that team because they had guys like Joel Anthony, Mario Chalmers starting. Whereas you look at the Nets now, they still have guys like Joe Harris, Jeff Green, DeAndre Jordan. Their team's a lot more filled out. So I think that definitely the Nets, I think their roster right now is the best roster we've actually ever seen put together from top to bottom. The talent is insane. Now, the fit is the only question mark, like you had mentioned, with Kyrie, Harden. How does that work? I think that ultimately the Nets are going to figure out that the ball's got to be in Harden's hand more often than not, which is interesting because obviously Kyrie and KD are going to have to sign off on that. But I think that's ultimately where they're going to go. I think the Nets should be considered the favorite as well. I just think that was the best roster we've probably seen in the NBA since it was a 12-team league. I just think it's going to be hard to really overcome that for a lot of other teams. I don't know. Finals prediction for me would be Clippers, Nets, and I think it's probably Nets in 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I forgot about the 5-year thing too. Yeah, I'm going to say the Mavericks for the 5-year picture.
At least you're being realistic in the second part.
I am a Mavericks fan. I'm usually a little more pessimistic. This really hinges on one thing, though. If Kristaps Porzingis doesn't stay healthy, we could easily see the Mavericks not even make it to the conference finals. I think that's very realistic. Over the next 5 years, if Kristaps Porzingis cannot find consistent health, I don't think it's a lock that we make the conference finals. But at the same time, if Kristaps Porzingis did get healthy and stay healthy,
I have cap on that.
You have cap on that. Okay, nice. Love that. But Luka's so great, don't get me wrong, but right now we just have not really a lot around him, actually. I mean, everyone says our role players are nice, but I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. wasn't that great of a player before he got to play with Luka. I think Luka's doing a lot of the elevating right now, and I think that this offseason is going to be a really big thing for us because we have a max slot open. Now, are we going to overspend on a guy? Possibly. To me, I would love to get 2 quality players at about $15 million each to really bring in so that we have trade bait to maybe move for an actual star at some point. I don't want to overpay a guy who's like a good player that's going to get an all-star level contract, like say Tobias Harris. I don't want to do that this offseason. I want to get 2 guys who are going to be impactful, can help us in the short term, and then we could use that are going to be valuable. Basically like what we're looking at Karis LeVert and Jared Allen just were in the trade package for Harden. I want 2 guys who are going to be valuable like that. Obviously, a guy I've been monitoring was Jonathan Isaac. He got extended. But there'll be a few other guys out there. We'll cover that in future episodes as well. Any other closing thoughts, Austin, that you want to share?
Nope. I'm just ready to watch some playoff football now. I think it's going to be great.
Me too. Yep. All right. Well, we will catch you guys with a mock draft tomorrow. Make sure you check that out. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys in the next video.